Hello and welcome back to a tutorial series on Crusader Kings 2. So, in the first episode, we looked a little bit at the user interface, looked at our character, arranged some marriages, and got most of our council in place. So this episode, I'm going to spend the first couple of minutes talking a bit about the rest of the user interface. At least some of the rest of the user interface. Start in the upper right here. You can see, again, the wealth that you can also see on the character sheet, prestige, piety. Now, this is domain size. It's not pronounced demesine, even though it looks that way, and it's not actually pronounced domain either. It's domain, French word. And that is the number of counties that you directly control. So I control one county, that of Dublin, so that's the one there, and I can control a maximum of 3 counties directly. If you go above that, you start suffering some pretty nasty penalties to your tax income, your vassals start to dislike you, that sort of stuff. You have to try and delegate out as you get bigger and bigger. This third one here is the number of vassals that you have. So I have 3, including myself. There's me, there's the mayor of the city of Dublin, and there's the bishop of Christ's Church. Down here this is just the speed controls, make it go faster, slower, pause, tells you the date. Underneath it here are high and low priority messages. If it's a high priority, it's going to pop up in here, low priority down there. Under here, it shows you the counties that are actually in your domain. So I've only got the one, which is the county capital, Aldcaith. Gives you the tax income from it, its fort level, which is how difficult it is to besiege, and the number of troops I can raise from the levy there. Down here's your map, and you've got different settings for the map, different map filters you can apply. This is the terrain setting. It shows you the terrain, and is most relevant when you're planning invasions and stuff like that. It'll tell you what sort of terrain that you're most likely to be fighting on and things like that, which can make a significant difference, as you might expect. Then there's the independent realms, which shows you all the different independent realms, color codes them for you. This is likely the map mode that you'll be using most often. The other ones are useful in specific circumstances, and some of them you'll never, ever use. Like you can look at the economy, what culture different places are, religion, who likes you, who hates you, who your allies are, things like that. So I've got one ally here in the form of dear old dad. The chance of a rebellion, what dynasty controls what, opinion, what other people think of you, direct vassals. So this will show any direct vassals that are under the influence of a given ruler. So this is actually controlled by the King of England, this is controlled by the Duke of York, who's loyal to the King of England, that sort of stuff. Republic trade zones, which you'll only ever use if you have the Republic DLC, and family trade zones, which again you'd only ever use if you had the Republic DLC. So for the most part, you're probably going to be leaving it on here. The only other one that might be relevant for you at the beginning of the game would be dejure duchies, because a dejure duchy is a duchy, or the area within a dejure duchy is the area that is considered to be a part of that duchy, even if the duchy doesn't exist. So if I click on that, and then zoom out a little bit here, you'll see that there is a duchy here called Meath. It doesn't actually exist right now, but it is indeed a duchy. There's also Munster, Ulster, Connaught, Leinster, York, all the different duchies. And so I could conceivably, I've got half of the duchy under my direct control, and then there's the other half here that is still independent. So if I were to conquer the other county there, I'd be able to start conquer the county of Kildare, I'd be able to start looking at potentially creating the Duchy of Meath. And it's a good early game strategy to try and stop being a count as quick as possible and become a duke. It's a significant jump up the feudal hierarchy. So that's always a good early game goal. And then there's also dejure kingdoms, so this is the dejure kingdom of Ireland that doesn't exist yet, and then dejure empires. So there's the potential of a unite the entire British Isles, becoming the Emperor of Britannia. Anyhow, only other thing I wanted to touch on before we actually start playing is other characters. So whenever you pull up another character, it'll bring up sort of the same card as you saw, and I can see this is Dad here. I can see all of his stats. And most importantly, you can look at his opinion. This will tell you how much somebody likes you or hates you. It ranges from positive 100 to negative 100. And it'll tell you exactly why. So my state diplomacy gives me 10. Gavelkind succession, which we'll get into that at some point, gives plus 10. We're from the same dynasty, which is an additional plus 5. And because he's my child, it's an additional 50. So, dear old Dad likes me quite a bit. Most people don't like you that much, at least at the beginning. Like, even if we look at my wife here, she's at plus 10, where it's just personal diplomacy and long reign. So I've been Earl long enough that I'm fairly well established, and she likes me a little bit because of that. Other people, like the Earl of Kildare, also doesn't mind me. I'm going to see if I can find somebody who doesn't like me here. Must be somebody around here who doesn't like me. A lot of the time, like when they're around plus 10 or so, it's just sort of a generic, just straight up state diplomacy because of my diplomacy skill. So, I can't find anybody with a negative 1 right now, but one will come up, I'm sure. So, we are ready to start playing. Oh, not quite. I forgot to pick an ambition. These are sort of short-term goals that you can set for yourself, and they'll give you a little bonus or penalty. So, well, some of them are longer-term goals, and there's a bunch of different ones. You can amass wealth, try and earn a bunch of money, improve my marshal, my stewardship, become King of Ireland, which is probably a little bit out of reach. But I'm going to pick a fairly simple one. Can I? She's 40. Might be a bit not quite so simple. Well, maybe I'll pick improve my learning, because I have a learning of 1 right now. So that's has the potential of bringing up events that could increase my learning a little bit, which is always a good thing. So, with that, and you just find that on your little character card. Let's get started. So, unpause, press space, and let it tick forward a couple of days here, and we should start getting some responses to my marriage proposals. There we go. So, to the heroic Earl Murchad, blessings upon you and your house. I accept your suggestion that Kentig and Mayor get married. So they are married now. And she shows up in my court. And, okay, he does not want to marry her to my Chancellor, though. So, to the Honourable Earl Murchad, peace be with you. Regrettably, I feel it would not be in my best interests. So sometimes they'll still say no, even if you think they might say yes. So we're just going to pause real quick here. That actually doesn't happen too often. Where's my... Let's find him another wife. He was my Chancellor? Was he my Chancellor? No, he was not my Chancellor. Who was he? Spy Master? He was my Spy Master, so I want somebody with a high intrigue skill. He's already said no with hers, so he'll say no again if I was persistent. Not seeing any really good... Oh, there's a swift one. Yeah, she'll do. She Okay, so we'll see if they'll get married. Just going to accelerate time a little bit here. Okay, so this is a random event. I'm the Earl, she's one of my courtiers, and I'm starting to think that she might have a thing for me. Now this is likely because he has the lustful trait. Different traits will sometimes bring up different events, and this is one of those. So just so you can see what happens, we will make a move. This has the potential of resulting in kids and making my wife hate me and all sorts of stuff like that, but also has the potential of making life interesting. Okay, so here, to the heroic Earl Murchad, peace be with you, I accept your suggestion that Domhnall and Gwendolyn get married, so they're getting married. And now we have a choice. Because he's in our family, we can either collect a royal aid duty to pay for the ceremonies, or gain some prestige instead. So the royal aid duty would give us 7.5 gold, which is not very much at all. At this stage, though, getting a bit of prestige might not be a terrible thing. Both are useful, and it kind of depends on what your situation is. In this case, I think I'm going to go for the prestige. So you can see now my prestige bumped right up to 70. Oh, and Lady Deborah has spurned my subtle advances. How can she resist my charms? And as a result of this, I'll end up liking her less for the next 5 years. Okay, and those guys got married. Perfect. So, now that we have that sorted out, and it's been about a month, if we go to the... where is it? Opinion? No, not opinion. Diplomatic relations. Now you see, there's 2 blue splotches here. I'm allied with the County of Gwynedd, or with the King of Gwynedd, and I'm also still allied with Dad. So now I can start looking at potentially fighting someone. It's an important decision to make who your early targets are going to be, because you don't have... you kind of got to really, really be able to commit. The early game wars can be very, very swingy, and you need to make sure that you're going into it from a position of strength. Now, if you remember when we were looking at the dejure duchies, how the Duchy of Meath is that County of Kildare. So let's take a look at him. He'd be a pretty good first target. So what you want to do is take a look first at whether or not he has any allies, and he does not. 0 allies, whereas I have 2 that I can potentially call into war. So that's a good thing. If we look at some of the other folks, see if I can find somebody who's got some allies here. Nobody has any friends. Okay. Well, hey, let's find someone who's obviously going to have some allies. So the King of England, you can see he's got a whole schwack of allies. These are all people he could call into a fight on his side. And if we look at me, I've got 2 allies, whereas the Earl of Kildare here has none. So that's a good start. The next thing you want to do is on here, on the character sheet, there's these 3 buttons up here. And one of them is called Realm Tree. And if you click on that, it brings up this pop-up window that tells you some information that you can't really get anywhere else. Most specifically, it tells you how big their army is. The total levy of the top liege is 698. So he can raise 698 troops. In the case of somebody more complicated, like him, if we go to the Realm Tree, he's got 10,000 troops he could conceivably raise, and he can also call on these guys who have... He's got 2,000, he's got 1,800. Now, they won't get all of those troops, but it gives you an idea sort of how many forces they have that they can call on. So, naturally, the state that I'm in right now, taking on the King of England would be a very dumb idea. So to check my own levies, I click on the military button up here, and it tells me that my personal levies are 791. I can raise a maximum of 791 troops from my personal holdings. I can also raise troops from my vassals. In this case, I'd be raising them from the city of Dublin. And Dublin would give me 71 troops. Raising your vassal troops will make them angry with you, but for a big war, oftentimes you'll have to. But generally, you don't want to leave them raised too long. You want to try and rely mostly on your personal troops. They cost you some money to keep raised, but it avoids getting your vassals really mad at you. So, as it stands right now, he's a pretty solid target. I can also check out and see what Dad's troop situation is like. Dad can raise almost 1,000 troops to come and help, and King Bledin can raise almost, he can raise 1,700, so I should be able to take him on no problem. So to do that, I can't just declare war. This isn't like a lot of other Forex games where you just go in and are like, I want your stuff. You have to have here what's called a valid casus belli, or just cause, to declare war. You just straight up can't do it if you don't have it. So I need to get a casus belli. And in the early game at least, you can end up with some very, very complex casus belli later on. But in the early game, the easiest way to do that is to go into your council, find your chancellor, and tell him to fabricate a claim. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my spy master here and have him build a spy network. Because if I can potentially start mucking about with him in some way, I can undercut his authority. Using the spy master like that is more relevant in a bigger fight, where if you were to assassinate the king and trigger a succession crisis or something like that, especially if he's got a young son or no son or something like that, it's much more relevant. But I'm just showing you that kind of as an example, because don't really need my spy master doing anything else right now. So now that I've got my first target picked, we'll click play again and crank up the speed a bit. Now it's just a matter of waiting. And kind of one of the downsides to playing as a count is there is oftentimes quite a bit of waiting involved. But we're actually in November, so I might be able to, under the Intrigue tab here, you can do different things. I can choose a plot, first of all. So I could start a plot to try and assassinate my wife, which I'm not terribly interested in doing. But there are definitely circumstances where killing your wife or killing your kid is a good idea, as twisted as that sounds. It'll also tell me if there's any threats in my kingdom. Again, it's much more relevant when you've got a big kingdom to worry about. Prisoners, if I have anybody in prison, and if I knew of any other plots that other characters were doing. I'm going to leave them blank for now, but other options here, I can invite a holy man, present a noble, or invite a noble or present a debutante. Will bring another person into my court. You need to pay a little bit of money, or lose some piety, or pay some money, and then it'll bring another person into your court. Can be a good thing to do if there's somebody you need to marry off or something like that, but not terribly relevant at this point. You've also got the option of holding a feast, holding a summer fair, going on a hunt, buying indulgences for your sins. Holding a feast is good when you've got a decent-sized realm. It'll improve your vassal's relationship with you. Invite them all over for a big party. Summer Fair can help with your cities. And a grand hunt is a good way to sort of increase your personal prestige and stuff like that. But right now I can't do any of them. I can't hold a feast because I need a prestige of at least 100. Can't have a fair because it has to be between May and August of a given year. And I can't go on a hunt because it is now after November. You go on, it has to be between September and November. So can't do any of that for now, at least. So let's just keep the game going. Let time tick by. I'm gonna just max out the speed, actually. Oh! So something just happened here. Dad has raised his army. I'm not entirely sure why, but if I want to find out, I click on that, and it'll tell me who he is fighting, right under his portrait here. So he is defending against Duke William the Bastard in the Norman conquest of England, and he's defending against King Harald Hardrada in the Norwegian invasion. So Dad kind of did something dumb here, and he must have allied himself with England. And England is about to turn into a real big mess. You can see here, it looks like Duke William has besieged London, and can't really tell what else is going on because it's covered by the fog of war. But, so Duke William's done his invasion. Doesn't look like King Harold's army is still around because it doesn't look like anything else is under siege. But that can be a dangerous situation for Dad here to get involved in. But not much we can do about it. He's going to go and do his thing. We have another event. The heavens can teach us much, and you have always been engrossed in the science of astronomy for the past several days. You have learned the names of celestial bodies and the various constellations and know how to use the stars for navigation. Your learning has improved. So this is that one of those special events that I got for having my ambition set to improve my learning. And here he says, so it's just a comet, not an omen of the end times. And then it should have another pop-up here. Autosave for the new year. Have I fulfilled my ambition? No, I still have the ambition to improve my learning. Ooh, and here's an event. It's a fairly common event. It's a mysterious book. Basically, you're forced to read it, but a book without a title was pushed into my hands by a hooded man clad in midnight blue. Something was said, but was lost in the confusion. The book was still there. And then your options are, hey, wait! You can gain 20 piety, and intense study of the book will follow. Or, it wants me to read it, and it'll gain you some prestige and piety each month. Now, because he's a bit older, I'm going to take the one-time boost to piety. If he was a really young ruler, then it would make more sense to get the illumination. But for now, because he is a bit older, we're just going to do the piety. So the secret within the book still eludes me after several weeks of intense study, wasted time and wasted ink. The man couldn't be anything but a maniac, filling precious parchment with malarkey and incomprehensible symbols. Then I learned to love books instead. He gains the trait scholar and improves his learning yet again. So now his learning is up to 4, which is significantly more respectable. So we're in May now, which means that I should, pause it here, I should be able to have a fair. So it cost me 25 gold to do, and it'll increase my prestige for the next couple of months, and it'll bring in some interesting events, so let's do it. So So I've given the order that a summer fair should be held in Dublin this summer. That should make the peasants happy. It very rarely actually makes the peasants happy. The jester who performed during the summer fair ran around in his silly hat with bells, and before I knew it, he hit me with his bauble. Everyone laughed at this and his jokes, or rather his insults. And then you can say it was rather funny and gained some prestige. Good to have good sense of humor. Murmurers are singing outside the town houses while slowly moving towards my castle. The summer fair suddenly felt less pleasant as the murmurers, clad in strange clothes, went from door to door, singing and frightening small children. If they think they will get in, they are wrong. And this will anger the peasants and give me a small chance of a local revolt. Come in, welcome! And this will make the mayor angry with me. And I can't wait, I love murmurers! And give me a chance of getting the gregarious trait. Now the gregarious trait is a wonderful trait to have. It increases diplomacy, makes people like you more, all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to go for that. See if... Now it was only a 25% chance to get it, and it doesn't look like I did. But not the end of the world. Still just waiting on that claim to get fabricated in Kildare. And the peddlers are loading their wares, and the merchants are taking down their stalls. The jugglers, strolling fairs, and other entertainers are preparing to leave. The summer fair is over for the year. It was great fun while it lasted, and I gained 10 prestige. So my brother became court chaplain in Leinster. That was why his little portrait there changed. The court chaplain is a bit of an odd thing. It makes them dress as though they're a religious figure, but they aren't necessarily. So it can be a little bit confusing when your heir is your court chaplain. I guess while we're waiting on something to pop up here, we'll talk a little bit about what a county looks like. So to look at a county, you click on it, and it'll bring up... Oh, a daughter was born. So my son now has a daughter. I'm a granddad. And my dad's a great-granddad, which is quite impressive. So, when you're looking at the county card, you'll see, it'll show you who's in charge, and then it'll show you the different holdings within that county. So, Alcaith is the county capital, and hold that thought for a moment. I grow more and more impatient with Chancellor Kenning. His slothfulness makes him go to extreme lengths to avoid having to do any actual work. And I can either give him a stern talking to, or give him one last chance to sharpen up. So, what that'll do is potentially make him angry with me. And... this one is there's a chance that I could gain the slothful trait, which is never a good thing. It lowers all of your stats. So that's a good one to avoid. And then potentially I could also throw him in jail. Well, it's not worth throwing him in jail for, so I'll give him a stern talking to. And continue talking about this. Oh, and he got mad at me. When I had finished talking sternly to the Chancellor, I didn't really expect him to talk back, but the anger that filled him fast was vented immediately. I ignored it and left Chancellor Kenning barely able to speak because he was so mad. So now he's mad at me. So he's going to be at minus 25 for the next 2 years. Anyhow, back to here. So the county capital is my castle, and it'll tell you how many troops are in the garrison, what the levy's like, and that sort of stuff. Oh, okay. So, that pop-up, you see here how it popped up in the important messages? My bishop has died. He was sick, got ill, and died. He was also one of my counselors. So now I have an open council position. Need to find a new steward. So to do that, now that there's a question mark there, I click on appoint, and I can take a look at who my best stewards are. And I don't have very many good ones. I guess the new bishop is probably the best option. Now, I'll just leave that as is. Anyhow, back to this screen. Resume the game again. This here shows you how much tax it brings in and how much of that tax you get. This is an annual amount, so each year this county makes 53.2, and I get 18.8 of that per year. Oh, one of my boys grew up. So I now have a second son. He just turned 16, which is the age that, age of majority, and he is all grown up now. You can now look at his stats. They're kind of set a bit more in stone. He's not the greatest in the world, other than wonderful beard. He's lustful, shy, wroth. He's subject to being very angry and cynical. So not the greatest stats, but hey, he's a second son, so not the most critical. Oh crap! Somebody's calling me. Here, I gotta pause the game. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. But where last we left off, my counselor had just died, and now one important thing to remember is when a counselor dies, they don't go back to doing, and you replace them, they don't go back to doing what they were doing. So anytime you replace a council member, you need to reassign them. So my steward right now is doing nothing. So I'm going to once again set him to research economic tech, and he's going to go back into Dublin. I'm going to leave the game on pause now, just so we can avoid having pop-ups continue to interrupt me and finish talking about this county screen. So I'd explained the county tax. This little bar down here represents the fort level, and if you get raided, particularly if you have the Old Gods expansion and you get raided by Vikings, because the Old Gods expansion bumps the date back to 867, I believe, so sort of at the height of the Viking raids and stuff like that, the Vikings will attack you and they'll steal your money. And that fort level shows how much of your wealth they can steal. Otherwise, the rest of this explains a bit more about the county itself. Now, the interesting thing about Dublin is its culture is Norwegian, whereas my culture is Irish. And eventually it'll flip back to being Irish because I'm in charge, and over time a county will gradually adopt your leader's culture. There is also the possibility, however, that the county can flip your leader, and your leader could end up becoming Norse. It also explains why the pictures here look a little bit different than the pictures in the other counties. But anyhow, onto the individual holdings now. There's 3 different types of holdings. The first one is a castle, and castle holdings tend to recruit that's where you want to recruit your troops from, is castle holdings. They'll give you the best troops, they'll give you the highest quality troops, and the most troops. They produce a reasonable amount of tax, especially if you upgrade them well, but they're not your main money makers. Down here is your main money maker, a city. So the city of Dublin, like if you compare the base tax of my castle here, it's got 10. The city has 24. So they produce a lot more money. They produce troops as well, but they tend to produce lower quality troops. They'll produce a lot of light infantry, archers, things like that. whereas my castle here produces heavy infantry, cavalry, things like that. The third are bishoprics, or at least if you're Catholic, they're bishoprics. Other religions have their own names for them, naturally. And they're sort of an in-between of the two. They produce reasonable troops. So, like, see, this bishopric produces some heavy infantry, whereas the city produces none. And they produce a bit more tax than castles, but what they're really good for is research. Both the cities and the bishoprics are good at research, whereas castles are not. And then these last two squares here are empty holdings. So I could create a new castle, or I could create a new city, or a new bishopric, or something like that in either of those slots. Castles are ruled by barons, or alternatively, as is the case here, it's ruled directly by me. A count or a duke or a king will rule a castle. Cities are ruled by mayors, and bishoprics are ruled by bishops. That becomes relevant if you somehow end up holding a bishopric or a city and you're a nobleman, because it gives you a penalty for having the wrong type of holding, but that's far beyond anything that you need to worry about. I think, because this video has gotten a little bit long, I might actually put a cut in here, and in the next video, hopefully we'll get this claim fabricated. It takes time, and it depends on how, like, there's a random, if I mouse over my chancellor here, it says the possible outcomes. There's a 10.6% chance every year that he'll succeed in fabricating a claim, whereas a 90% chance that nothing will happen. And he's only been at it for a bit over a year now, so need to wait a little longer to see if we actually get that claim. Oh, and interesting thing happened here. Notice how England has changed color. That is because it looks like Harald Hardrada won. So the King of Norway now controls all of England. I suspect that there's probably going to be some rebellions and whatnot popping up here, but as of right now, England is unified under the Norse. So that's interesting. I wonder what happened to William. So he's still alive, and he's still actually fighting. So he's still, he's attacking King Harold in the Norman conquest of England. So they're still going to duke it out there, but it looks like King Harold Godwinson lost to Norway right off the bat here. You see some very strange things happen in England every now and then. But anyhow, I'm going to put a cut in, and we will see you in the next episode. Cheers.